Here we go. All right. So this is the first in our community spotlight series, which is basically an extension of both Anne's storytelling and finding more and more ways to engage with the community and kind of bring attention to cool businesses or projects or just different individuals in the space. It's not even really specific to both and at all. It's just like we're here, we're
Hmm.
queer, let's celebrate things. And who would be better for this than Yuri, who's like really our number one fan and such a core member of the community, creates such incredible
Thank
videos.
you.
And yeah, just as soon as we were thinking about doing this series, you're the first person to pop to mind of like, oh, we totally need to do it with you.
Thank
So
you.
happy to be here with you, and maybe you can start off by
Yes.
your name, pronouns, maybe where in the world you are, and also maybe how you kind of initially came across both and, or what sort of how our relationship.
Yes, I can do all those things. I'm gonna try my best not to ramble because I'm definitely a rambler. Um, so I'm Yuri, and I use them pronouns. And let's see, what else did you ask me? Where I'm from? I currently am located in Frederick, Maryland. And I came across both and I think from I think I was just scrolling and I love fashion. I'm always like, I feel like ear to the ground of like new fashion brands and stuff. So I get ads all the time, I think, for new fashion brands. And I see a lot of gender inclusive stuff, new gender inclusive brands popping up all the time. But when I saw the Both and ad, it happened to be the one where you were showing the diagrams of like how your clothing worked. And I had just recently had top surgery at the time, and I was like, wow, this is a really, really cool idea. I'm very curious because, I mean, at the time I was like, I have menswear that I think fits me well. But I was like, I'm kind of curious to see what this is all about because it's a very unique idea that I haven't seen before, which led to me placing an order, I think, of I got two Judes initially because I just had top surgery. So I was like, what better one to try? And then I also got the original Marlows, which I still have, even though they are updated now. But yeah, I gave them a try and it just absolutely blew me away. I had never really put on clothing that I didn't even realize it. I thought mine fit me well, but I tried the both end and I was like, wow, my body looks just so different in the best way. And obviously, you you call me both end super fan, but it is very true. I would like immediately like everyone needs to know about this. I need to tell everyone about this immediately. And I was so like excited when you eventually reached out and asked me to work with the brand because I was like, honestly, I'm gonna keep talking about you guys anyway. So like I'm happy to kind of
Just makes
be
things simpler.
in on the project now. Yeah. I'm also so honored that you chose me for this opportunity. I genuinely reached out. I was kind of surprised, but super, super excited. And I'm so honored that you want to feature my story.
Of course. All right. Well, in terms of featuring your story, I have some questions that I
Yes.
wrote out before. I'm going to take notes while we talk, but I wanted to dive right in with a big question, but a one that really obviously
Hmm.
animates much of the ethos behind both and, which is how do you
Hmm.
define gender joy?
Ooh, gender joy. See, now you're really gonna have me trying my best not to ramble because I like stumble into my answers. I feel like gender joy to me is just kind of like, and it's in my head. I like want to give a unique response. It's not just regurgitating what a lot of people say, but I also feel like it's kind of a universal experience of just like truly like seeing yourself as you've always wanted to see yourself. So in my case, like, as someone that is very fluid with my gender, I noticed it does kind of vary day to day, but um it's also kind of like small things. It's less so for me always been like the social aspect, more so for me been the physical comfort in my body. So especially tying in both ends, like, I get a lot of gender joy out of like putting on clothing that just gives me like this silhouette that I'm looking for. Cause I feel like, in terms of gender, a lot of it can be tied not just to my physical body, but also like the way that it looks when I go out into the world. Like, that's a big aspect of gender because gender is kind of a social thing. So for me, being able to feel like I can represent all facets of myself, that is gender joy to me, given having like flexibility in that too, like being able to look really feminine on a given day or really masculine or some kind of blend of both. That always makes me feel very like, happy, excited about my gender. Just kind of, yeah, I guess as a non-binary person, being a little outside that binary and being able to see all the genders reflected in myself is really, really cool externally since it's always just been internal. So,
Totally.
um,
Totally.
you know,
What about, I feel like you're kind of primed because you're talking to me to think about gender joy through the lens of clothing, but like, what about in other ways? How does gender joy show up in your life in ways?
Yeah. See, like these are interesting questions. And I honestly was nervous because I was like, I want to have like insightful things to say, but sometimes these are topics that I feel like I'm still searching to find the answers myself because
Mm,
I think I honestly go back and forth sometimes between like, understanding what brings me gender joy or even understanding the things that sometimes make me dysphoric is sometimes like a question I have to ask myself a lot of the time. Like what causes these things? And I'm so sorry, I should probably put my phone on do not disturb. I hope it doesn't mess up the recording.
seems,
Sorry.
seems like it's
Okay. Put my other one on, but not this one apparently. But gender joy to me, let me think. I gotta think about this question for a second. I'm like,
we can also circle
thinking about
back
all the
if you want me to
instances.
ask other questions, and then if anything come
I
up.
might, because I'm like, I know that there's definitely aspects, but also it's one of those questions that I'm like, I want to have a good answer, and I feel like I got to warm up and get less nervous to answer that question.
Cool. All right.
Yeah,
Okay, then let's go back a little bit to you and your background. Give me the sort of
yeah,
elevator pitch quick on like where did you grow up? What was your childhood like? What did you want to be when you grew up? Just like give us
yeah.
how
A
you've
little
come
bit
to
of
be where you
background,
are today.
which I don't know if I need to mention, like what I do for a living, or are we going to get to that later
We'll get to
to
that.
connect off? Okay. So backstory to keep it concise. Let's see. I've always lived in Maryland. I grew up in Upper Marlboro first, and then I moved to Middletown, which is a part of Frederick County, in like fourth grade ish. To be honest, it's interesting because Middletown is like nicknamed Vanilla Valley. It's a very non-diverse neighborhood, and my family is actually like quite conservative, very religious, and honestly not super supportive of my journey. So it's interesting because my whole backstory is something that I've had to make an active conscious effort to think about these days because it's like a
Mhm.
chapter that I just kind of closed and was like, we're done with that. But I think it is important to look back at those situations because when you get out of them and you grow past them and you become a very different person, it's important to reflect on that so that you can appreciate the journey, I think, and appreciate how much you've accomplished. So for me, when I was growing up, I was always big into art, always. But primarily, what I wanted to do growing up was a really, really like confusing thing I didn't completely understand because I had a lot of different things that I liked and a lot of different things I was very good at. And so finding out what was going to be a blend of that was very confusing. And also, like having parents that did not support me wanting to do art definitely made it a very even more confusing journey. But I did always know that I had a huge, huge passion for helping people. That was like my number one thing that I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to like uplift others and make them feel good. Nothing makes me feel better than that. Because I grew up in the church too, which like, that was an experience for sure. But I also got to do a lot of like volunteer work, mission trips and stuff, and really explore my love for helping people. Even like, and that's something that I think sticks with me
Mhm.
even past not being religious anymore. But I do appreciate like the opportunities to grow up in a space that nurtured me being like more of a giver, which
Yeah.
definitely I think led into what I do now.
Well, that seems
Did I
like a
answer your
really
question?
good, that seems like a good lead in. What do
Yeah.
you do now?
I run a hair salon slash do hair for specifically targeted for LGBTQ plus and neurodivergent individuals. Of course, I also welcome all allies. Everyone is welcome. Uh, but yeah, I do a lot of specialty hair, but a little bit of everything, mostly the space.
Hair has always fascinated. I'm kind of scared of hair. I have like a phobia of like loose hair, so that always like made it impossible
Yeah,
for it to be an arena I would go into. But I do find it A, so creative, and B, just so existentially calming. Like it just, even being on the
yes,
receiving end, there's nothing better than just going in and being like, I don't know. You decide. Like I'm in your hands. You're the expert here. And yeah, it's such an amazing
yeah.
dichotomy.
Well, I mean, hair is such a important facet of the gender journey. In fact, I think especially for trans masculine people, a lot of like the primary like big steps I feel like into exploring your trans masculine identity for a lot of people is one, you start shopping the men's section, and two, you get that like first fade, shape up haircut, a little bit more masculinized, and that's a really big deal for a lot of people. Unfortunately, one that is a really tough thing to find at a lot of salons, like gender affirming experience in that way, because I think in my head, a lot of it is tied to one, a lot of trans masculine people maybe have grown up just going to like typical hair salons that aren't familiar with like barbering techniques, or two, you do go to a barber and they're just really like not, they can be a little transphobic sometimes in those spaces, sometimes a lot of transphobic. And so I feel like, you know, with that being so important to how we see ourselves, especially early on in the transition, exploring that identity, it's important to have a safe space to not only explore like the, you know, be listened to, have someone understand your journey. Because also that's the other thing too that I tell everyone, like, just because you're exploring a trans masculine identity does not inherently mean that we need to do a masculine haircut. We want to do something that feels like you, which does not have to be masculine. And hair is one of those things that, like, you know, even though hair itself has no gender, I view the things of like feminine, masculine, androgynous, those are aesthetics, and aesthetics that can help us feel more like our true self and reflect that we talked about earlier, the kind of gender joy aspect. I feel like it's very deeply tied to that. And especially because I think the Venn diagram of like neurodivergent and trans people tends to be like circle, you know, like it also comes with a lot of other stressors too, coming into a space, letting someone touch you that you know, you have to feel very comfortable with. So it was an experience that I personally knew that even just working in salons when I started, I couldn't find just a space that I felt respected as a trans and neurodivergent person. But then also I realized, like, when I get my hair done, even to this day, I don't really have any place that I can go to where I get the kind of experience that I offer people, which is why I wanted to start the business eventually, because I was like, this is a big gap that I think needs to be filled. I want my clients to feel comfortable because it's a big deal and it's very stressful for a lot of people. And not to ramble for too long, but I have noticed also, it's kind of a joke that I have in my studio. Whenever I get, especially trans masculine people, but just most people in general, they always have the same story of like, I haven't been to salon in 5+ years, you know, and especially trans masculine people, it's every single one. They're like, yeah, I got my hair botched in my first haircut that I tried to get it cut short, and I've been cutting my own hair ever since. This is the first time you've touched my hair in like, you know, 5-6 years. And it used to really intimidate me, but now I'm just like, I'm so excited. You're going to have the best day of your life.
That's awesome.
It's very fun.
Do you cut your own hair?
Yes, I do cut my own hair,
So
which is funny. Thank you. It's the reverse of every other trans masculine person, where they have always cut their own hair, and I'm the first person that like is a professional doing their hair. For me, it was the opposite. It was I let everyone else cut my hair, and then I got to a point where I was like, it got butchered so many times. I was like, you know, I think I can just do this myself. I've done these haircuts enough. I think I can do it. And so now that's what I do now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how, you know, if
Thank you.
people are in Maryland, they want to find you, how can people find you?
They can find me on social media at Cool Hair Boy, BOI, for boy. And I think that's probably the most concise way. I have a website too, but that's going to be linked on my social media. So
cool. Great. We'll
yeah.
we'll do a call out for that again at the end. But
Yes.
I wanted to go through some more questions. I wasn't actually going to get to the hair thing, and we're going to kind of backtrack and talk about gender and other questions more broadly. I wanted to ask you a two-part question. One is,
yes,
what would you say? Often when I'm doing these storytelling things, as you've obviously seen through the Bella campaign and a lot of what we've done, like, I'm often visualizing younger queer folks who are like starting out on their journey, and they're like looking for other narratives. I find narratives so much more impactful than just like information. I don't want a Wikipedia page about being trans. I want to hear other trans people.
Yeah, of course.
Feel myself reflected.
Yeah.
So I always like to ask people, you know, like, what have been some of the biggest challenges on your gender journey, and also like what have been some of the best surprises on the gender journey?
Okay, so some of these questions I was preparing myself mentally. I was like, you got to keep it concise. Don't just ramble for 20 minutes, because I will.
I'll cut you off if you ramble too long. Don't worry.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So biggest challenges and biggest surprises. So I'm going to start maybe with surprises, because the challenges were immense and numerous, honestly. But surprise is the biggest one, being like that I liked being on testosterone, and that not just that I liked it, but that my body feels like it was built for it. Like, it's actually a very interesting experience, because I think that people, when they look at me a lot of the time, because I am very hairy thanks to my genes and stuff, and I just have a very masculine body type, I think people always assume that my gender must be like, you know, I'm non-binary, like, you know, I'm a dude, but I just like to dress femme. But I'm like, no, like, actually, I never had that much social dysphoria. So for me, I feel a lot more comfortable, and always have, like, it doesn't even ever occur to me that I should be like in men's spaces, because that's not something that I ever really thought about. So growing up, like, you know, my gender, having the physical dysphoria was very confusing. And I always kind of knew that I wanted some kind of top surgery. It was just a matter of like, am I getting a reduction or a mastectomy? And then a mastectomy just seemed like the better option because I just didn't care. But testosterone is something that I never, ever would have thought growing up that I would have liked. And even when I was thinking about going on it, I was terrified. Literally, like, is this not a good idea? Because I'm like so scared. I don't know if I'm supposed to be this scared. Which, spoiler alert, I've learned that all trans people are scared to transition. So it's not just, doesn't mean that's not right for you. But um, it was surprising because I was really nervous about, like, I didn't want facial and body hair, but I knew I was probably going to have a lot because I'm Italian, Lebanese, and Polish. So that was just like a given. And I was just really nervous about like, oh, I don't really want to look like a guy. I was so nervous that I would hate it. But I realized once I got on testosterone that the more those changes occurred, it was actually super, super exciting and affirming. And a lot of what I had felt previously being scared of those things were just actually just like that kind of social conditioning of being raised like a conservative woman of like, yeah, all that stuff is gross. You're not allowed to have it. You'll be so unattractive with it. And then I just started being like, well, I don't care if anyone else thinks I'm unattractive. I feel hot. So like, that's what matters. And especially, like I said, testosterone being a better fit for my body. I had pretty much every issue you could have with estrogen. I realize now my body just did not function well on it. I had so many health issues. And then I went on testosterone and my levels are astronomically high, almost at the ceiling. I think they're at like 900 right now. And I have no negative effects whatsoever. My moods are more stable than they've ever been. I feel so much calmer. Like my health issues all resolve themselves very quickly. It is honestly insane. And like I wasn't planning on staying on T longer than a year, but now I'm pretty much just thinking about staying on it for life because like, it's just literally fixed so many problems that I had. And at this point, I'm like, I don't even care what it does physically. It's just healthcare for me. It's just medicine. So that was a big surprise to me. So I'm going to pause and then we can go
that's
into
great.
challenges.
I love that line. I don't even care what it does to me. It's just medicine. I love that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
No, that's great.
I
That's a
mean, if it
great
were
answer.
cousin thing.
Since you said that there have been so many, let's make you narrow down for challenges to like, it doesn't have to be your biggest challenge, but maybe the challenge
I
you
was just
feel
gonna
like
like
you now have
categorize
the
it
most
generally.
insight to like talk about or
Yeah.
refine.
Yeah. So I was gonna say I'm not gonna like, I mean, by many I just mean they can all kind of be summed up into like a couple general groups. I think the biggest challenge is that it's kind of the flip-flop where like the surprise is that wow, this just agrees with me. And even like again, the things that everyone talks about being negative effects like body odor, like hair loss, I don't have any of that. I haven't had any of those kind of effects. They're not even negative, but they're just normal. I haven't even had those. When it comes to challenges, it is kind of the reverse story, I feel like. So for me, the biggest challenge with just transitioning in general was like just, well, what was the original question? Was it challenges about transitioning or I need to remember
Well,
the
it was
original
technically
question?
challenge on your gender journey, but if that
Gender
feels
journey.
like
Okay.
it's translated to transition, then that's fine.
So gender journey is actually, no, that's actually a better question because I was like, there's a couple topics that I was excited to talk about in this because they're things that I feel like I should have talked about sooner on social media because I don't ever see people talking about, like, I've never seen someone like me, someone that has had the journey that I have. And it's something I'm like, well, if I haven't seen anyone, maybe I need to be that representation. So I'm excited to talk about these things. But one of the biggest challenges early on that I can hopefully describe briefly is that, like I mentioned earlier, gender was so confusing because I didn't have social dysphoria. So that was really weird to be like, like I never really thought about it was weird being in women's spaces. That never felt uncomfortable. That felt correct to me. I felt very like comfortable with women. But I realized like I had so much discomfort in my body. And, I think it's easy for people that are assigned female at birth to assume early on, yeah, like all women are insecure. So it's just normal insecurities, not realizing that like, things like eating disorders and whatnot develop because a lot of the time you are dysphoric about a lot of different things. And so for me, realizing that it was dysphoria and that I was trans and that you could be, like non-binary was a concept that like many other non-binary people, I was like, oh, everyone feels like this. This is not a thing, only to realize, no, not everybody feels like this. So that was a real big challenge early on to just confront those feelings because I just shoved them down because I didn't feel like I had the space in my household to explore them and it didn't feel safe. So I just didn't think about it. And then when I finally started to, it was very confusing. I was like, why Do I have like, why would I want my body to be more like, like I used to say early on, I was like, I feel like I'm like a trans woman early on. I was like, how is that possible? That's not a thing. I realized that gender can be whatever you want it to be, and it doesn't have to be those binaries. Having a
Mm,
body does not equate to this gender. So that was confusing for me early on because that was a concept I'd never been introduced to.
that's such an
Um,
interesting. I'm having a bit of an epiphany now, so I'm really glad that you're being the representation
yeah.
here. But like, I'm realizing I've never
Hmm.
had any kind of social dysphoria either. I'm incredibly,
Hmm.
and to this day,
Yeah.
in fact, I was telling my wife I was on a trip to Portland, Oregon, a couple of months ago for some both and stuff, and ended up being invited. Well, it's a long story, but I ended up being invited to this dinner, this birthday party for this connection I was meeting in town, and it was her and like 10 of her female friends. And I
Hmm.
went and I had this amazing night. We were eating sushi and we were like sitting around, and it was a very female space in the way that it was being held.
Yeah.
And I realized I hadn't been in like a purely female space in a while, and that I was like
Yeah.
almost tearfully grateful that I was like still included
Yeah.
and that there wasn't any friction there, but
Hmm.
B, how much I had just like missed that and how much I love those spaces. But it didn't even occur to me to think about like that I should feel uncomfortable there, or that there's like
Hmm.
that it's like, a threat to my
Yeah.
masculinity or anything if I feel at home in female spaces. But I guess I
Yeah.
had never really thought about that explicitly as like a box one has to check to be. You saying that has really clicked
Yeah.
for me. Hmm.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, honestly. It's something that again I think needs to be talked about because I've always heard the reverse. I heard people being like, I knew I was trans because I hated being called she, her. I hated being a girl. I always wanted to be like with the boys and stuff. And I always like, felt like I should have been in their spaces. And then a lot of those people too, like, especially for non-binary people, I feel like a lot of like the non-binary people that I know are people that have the social dysphoria aspect where they don't want to be seen as women at all. They don't feel like they should be like around the spaces or whatever, but they don't want to transition physically because they don't have physical dysphoria. So for me being the opposite, it was very confusing. I was like, how is this possible to like get such gender euphoria out of packing and binding and stuff, but not really necessarily feel like I'm being perceived wrong, like I didn't have a problem with people viewing me as a girl. It was very confusing. But I think more people need to realize that, like the trans experience is simply just not completely being cisgender. I guess is the only baseline that we
Right.
have. Like it can be whatever you need it to be, whether you again, like for me, I think about this every day because I got so anxious, and I know this is a bit of a tangent, but I promise it's something I've been meaning to talk about. Early on in my transition, I got so anxious being on testosterone because I was like, oh my God, but if I start to look like a guy, I'll never be able to go back to being a girl. What if I want to be a girl again? What if I want to go back? Because my gender does fluctuate, and I knew this about myself. I was like, my physical presentation changes so much year to year, and my comfort levels do too. So I was like, what if I want to go back? What if I ruin everything and I'll never be happy again? Whatever, blah, blah, blah. What everyone worries about, I guess. Then I realized though, I was like, but gender has nothing to do with my physical presentation. That's how I feel. So if I want to be a girl, I can
Mm.
be a girl that has facial hair if I want. Like that's a completely social concept. So like if I want to use she, her, I always can. And if people are disrespectful about that, then that's their problem. Like, it's got nothing to do with just the fact that, oh, I grew facial hair now. Now I don't get to ever girl if I want to. If I feel that way, then I feel that way, and that's fine.
You just like use
So
girl
just
as a
like I said,
verb. I don't get to ever girl. If I like, I love
yeah, I
awesome.
mean, I think I call it like girl moding and boy moding because I still like to do it. Girl moding just takes a lot of work, so I don't do it often. But it's still fun. I think honestly, I think being a girl can be really fun. And I think
Totally.
anyone who says it's not is lying.
That's awesome. I love that.
um,
I love
if you're
that.
seen correctly.
No, that's a really
You
good
know.
that's a really good answer. I'm gonna think about that, and I might have more questions
Hmm.
to unpack there, but
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. Okay. Of course, we have already hit our time, but we're gonna go a little over and squeeze a few more questions in.
I booked out like an hour,
Um,
so
what does your day-to-day life look like right now? I mean, you mentioned the hair stuff, like, but yeah, paint me a picture. What are you up to?
so much chaos. Honestly, I am trying to get some semblance of order in my life right now. But currently, my day-to-day life is when I'm not going to work at my own studio, which is my life and I love it. Um, Currently, I suppose, well, right now it's so boring because I just moved. So like my literal day-to-day life is just when I'm home, I'm unpacking and doing housework, and then I'm at work and everything is work. But in my actual off time, when I have spare time, I love to play video games and watch anime. Those are my two passions, actually, my two like big special interests. And that's why in our Discord, I'm gonna plug the Discord. I had you guys make a video game server, but no one's joined me, so you all need to play games
Okay,
together.
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I'm like, let's all play Crab Champions, guys. Let's do it. But yeah, I primarily, like I said, my day-to-day life, I have two beautiful cats that I cannot believe have not interrupted this call yet. They usually are obnoxious about it. And I honestly, right now, I'm in a big phase of currently, and again, my autism brain just having trouble having a bigger spectrum of this question, but currently I'm really trying to focus this year on balancing work life better. So reindulging in a lot of hobbies that I don't have anymore. I used to do a lot of like, music and singing and also art, like physical art and things like that, and just like crocheting and all different types of creative outlets that I kind of got away from, which I don't know if you could relate to this as a business owner, but I feel like when you start a business, it kind of consumes your life for a while. And it kind of still does, but so you have to like actively make that space. So we're trying to do that. I don't think I answered your question well at all.
I think no, I
It's
think
just
you
because
answered
currently
it
I'm like, my
perfectly.
day-to-day is terrible. Yeah.
Perfectly. You've inspired me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna change my last question, and I'm gonna change it to one of my favorite questions I ask people, usually when I'm like meeting them for the first time, but it's a great way
Mm-hmm.
to get a read on a person. And I don't think I've ever asked you this, which
Mm-hmm.
is, if you had to describe what it feels like to be you in a color, a shape, and a texture, what would they be?
Oh my goodness. These abstract questions. My autism takes everything literally. It's gonna be tough. I think I know what you mean. Okay. And a
I can give
color,
you,
please give me yours. I'll give the
okay.
context.
So my color is like turquoise. My
Mm-hmm.
shape is a really long line that looks like it's straight because it's so long, but actually it has a slight curve to it. But it's like, like
Mm-hmm.
horizons. Like there's no
Yeah.
proportionality to it. And then the texture is like the texture of like woodland moss when it's like quite like buoyant, like bouncy in the forest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. See, because my brain immediately goes like, what are your favorite versions of these things? Which is not necessarily expressive of me. And
Right.
that's the fun
Yeah, it
thing
has to
about
be what
being
it
autistic
feels
is
like to be
abstract
you.
questions have to be turned. Abstract questions in autism brains have to be turned into like, what's a literal analytical algorithmic way
I
to
see.
explain
Honestly,
and
if we're
describe
short
it?
circuiting the
So
brain, we do not have to do this. I'm not
no,
trying to short
that's
circuit
why
the
I'm
brain.
no, it's not. I was just like, I just am gonna say what first pops into my head instead of thinking hard about it because I think
Great.
that'll mess
Let's
me
do
up.
that.
So honestly, at this point, I don't even know if this would be in an abstract way, but at this point, like the color that is just like when I see it is just me is just mint because my whole studio, that was the color that I picked because it just resonated with me. And now my whole branding is that. And so mint is just me now. That is just my whole thing. For shape, the first thing that popped into my mind was just like little, like, I can't even explain it. It's not even a shape, but it's like a little wiggly, like a circle, but it's like all wavy all the way around. It's
Okay.
just kind of like wobbly. That's kind of how I would describe myself. And a texture, I think I can describe this. It also makes sense. I don't have like a reference point, but like something that's like, at least how I view myself, really like tough on the outside, but then
Okay.
like the inside is very soft, which is funny because I think people wouldn't feel that way about me, but that's how I view myself. You know,
Somebody recently gave me jelly bean for that reason. They were like,
jelly
it's
bean
got
is
like this
good. Yeah.
like calcified outside, but it's super squishy in the middle.
Yeah, honestly, I have oh, here's one. Here's a cat. But I have a like in my head a food in mind that is that texture, but I don't know what it is. Like I'm thinking like the hard chocolate shell, but like the inside's gooey. And I'm like, what am I
Maybe
thinking of?
truffle?
I have no idea. Maybe. I don't know.
Truffle. I mean,
Probably.
that would be great. Being a truffle would be a great way. So, okay,
Yeah.
cool. Love it. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't talk about? That makes sense. Obviously, you and I always have things to talk about. But like, is there anything
I know. I was
coincidence that
like,
you're like, ah,
what
damn it,
don't
I
I
really
want to
wanted to
talk
talk about
about?
this?
Yeah, let me think. I mean, that's the problem is that like obviously there's so much that like we could talk about in terms of my studio and the message that it has and the importance that it has that
Yeah.
could be a whole separate thing, of course. But I also feel like, for the sake of this interview being about me and not my business, let me think. What's the thing that I most want to talk about? Honestly, I'm glad that we did talk about one of the primary things that I haven't gotten to that I've always wanted to is to just to talk about um the interest in being a person that has very little social dysphoria, but being fully medically transitioned and all that is, like I said, something that I don't ever, even in my studio, I talk to trans people every day and I love hearing their experiences and it's very, very healing for me, honestly. It's been so healing to have my studio, and I'm so glad that I have it, because I know that people thank me all the time for having a space, but I'm just thankful to finally have a community, because I haven't ever in my life. And I guess that is like, I guess the only thing that I could bring up that maybe we haven't talked about is that, like, I really, actually, yeah, let me think if I can phrase this in a way that makes sense. But another message that I do want to definitely put out there. I think in our lives, especially as trans and neurodivergent people, we're kind of told that, like, the way that we are doesn't work with society, and we have to change, and we have to conform, and we have to fit into these boxes. And the thing is, like, if you're not able to, like, find a job that fits you, or find a lifestyle that makes sense to you, like, because to be honest, we live in a world that's not created for us. Like, we have to make our own spaces. So I really encourage people to, if you don't find a space that you fit into, to just make one. Because, like, for me, all the reasons why I was told I wasn't a good fit for so many other things make me a perfect fit for what I do now. From like, being a business owner has been great, even though I never really, like, set out doing that. But it's been great because I am neurodivergent, and this year I've really had to face the facts that my body, between, like, now realizing I have POTS, which is really cool, but it cannot physically work the long days that I'm expected to, and I mentally can't keep up with the full-time demand of being in the salon 35 hours a week and doing business owning. It's just my brain can't do it without getting complete burnout and then getting behind on stuff. So I started thinking bigger and being like, well, no one else has run their businesses in the ways that, like, I'm about to this year, but I'm like, I had to figure out what worked for me. And now, being neurodivergent, where it used to be such a big weakness, it's going to be, like, it has been a huge strength, because I'm playing to that. I specialize in something because that's just how my brain works, instead of trying to constantly conform to what people expect. And again, being a trans person, like, couldn't find a space that I fit into. So I was like, well, I'm going to make my own space, and just fingers crossed that people can come and enjoy it. And it's so lovely getting the feedback from other people in the community, that all the reasons why I was told by others that, like, you're never going to have a successful life or career or get out of this place or whatever, are the main things that I hear people saying to me that are their favorite things about coming and getting their hair done with me. So it's super healing. And I tell everyone, like, stop trying to fit into boxes that don't fit you. And if you can't find a box that does fit you, make your own, and it'll be great.
I love that. I love that.
There you
Okay,
go.
well, everyone definitely check out Cool Hair Boy. We will do links in all the various
Thank you.
places. And, I
Mhm.
personally and both and holistically are huge fans.